So where I'm from, months between June and September are where you can enjoy the outside weather, it's very warm, and you have these, of course, core summer months. So with that being right around the corner, what about watches for the summer? What are the best watches to wear during this part of the year, or if you're just from a warmer climate? Well, that's what we're gonna be looking at here today. Now, a summer watch, is that really even a technical thing? Probably not, but what I'm looking at here are watches that will have versatility in the summertime, maybe are best utilized in the summertime. We have pops of color, looking at things that might have some more fun expression of cases or dial colors, and they also just have maybe summer styling. Looks great by the pool, maybe looks great in an aquatic environment where you're going to be during these summer months. So that's what I'm looking for here. Some other parameters for this list. I want 100 meters of water resistance if possible in pretty much every scenario. No 30 meters of water resistance given the aquatic tendencies of many during this time of year. And then also rubber straps or bracelets, no leather in this instance. We also will accept NATOs. And then finally, ascending in price with no limit. And I will have a small section and a segment within here looking at some micro brands, just because I feel like for this style of watch, and you're talking about pops of color, maybe some more crazy expression, micro brands are a good place to look for watches of that type. Now, before we jump into this video, because we're really steering into the world of more daring dial executions and designs, I do want to recommend field watches as another place to go down. Instead of touching on that in this video, I would just recommend our comprehensive guide to all the field watches in the industry, or many of the top ones in the industry. We'll have over 20 in that list, all different price segments. I'll have an article down below, so definitely check that out. So now for our first watch here, starting with ascending order, we're gonna begin with the Casio Oak G-Shock. We're gonna look specifically at the red reference. This is the GA2100 4A. So this model starts around $100 for its price, 45.5 millimeter case size, and a lug to lug of 48.5 millimeters, reasonably thin on the wrist for a G-Shock standard at 11.8 millimeters. This watch wears close to a 40.5 to 41 millimeter case when you factor it all into the equation. Analog digital display. This red is of course going to offer up a ton of pop of color. Multiple functions here: stopwatch, world time, multi-alarm system, calendar to the year 2099, and also water resistance of 200 meters, more than you'll ever need. This is the Casio G-Shock style watch to go for those that don't like the digital approach and want something with an analog hybrid type of display. Next here, I want to look at two different Seiko watches, and there are plenty of Seiko watches that you can look at for this genre. But here I want to start with a Samurai model, and then we'll look at a Turtle model. This with the SRPD09 to start us out. So this is a reference that's going to have a Save the Ocean style dial. It's a watch I've worn in summers in the past, and I just like the look of this. It just exudes this marine aquatic type of undertone that I liked at this time of year. And that blue gradient dial with the wave pattern is very striking. It starts with this very light blue and then transitions into this almost complete dark black at the other half of the dial. So very visually entrancing. You're getting a rather standard Samurai case here, 44 millimeters, 12.8 millimeter thickness, and a lug to lug of 48 millimeters. So not very broad on that end, but it does have this angular lug design that is going to be very stark on the wrist. It's almost imposing with its nature, which kind of become a defining characteristic of the Samurai. Automatic 4R35 movement on the inside, 200 meters of water resistance, mineral crystal, ISO compliance, lume is fantastic, and a dial that's certainly going to pop. And now with the Samurai on one end, I do want to look at the Turtle next, and here with the Patty SRPE 99. So this is a watch very similar to that of the Samurai. It's going to wear smaller than its case size, 45 millimeters, but with that lug to lug of 47.7 millimeters, whereas closer to a 41.5 to 42 millimeter case. It is going to be on the thicker end at 13.4 millimeters, but still maintaining 200 meters of water resistance. Has the Seiko 4R36 with that day date complication at that 3 o'clock. And I just like the look of the Pepsi bezel with that aluminum type of insert, and it just pops with that sunburst glow to it when the sun hits it perfectly. It just reminds me of the summertime. I don't know really what it is. It just simply reminds me of this time of year. The Turtle is going to be defined by less of an angular profile to the lugs and case and being more rounded out, resembling that of the 6309 reference from years prior from Seiko, a true pillar in their dive watch history. For another dive watch under $1,000 that I think has a little bit more pop to it, and actually is probably one of the more unconventional and unique dive watches in this price range, the Bulova Devil Diver. So this is available in a couple different case sizes. I like this one because it's going to have a more colorful approach with this orange dial, very much pops. 41 millimeters though is the really main reason why I like this. 41 by 45 millimeter lug to lug. It is gonna be on the thicker side, 14.5 millimeters. I find this wears like a turtle in many ways with just its broader profile of the lugs and just how this case is just rounded off to such an extreme degree. This is gonna wear like a true 40 on the wrist, 200 meters of water resistance, sapphire crystal, and also these very unconventional hour markers that are going to be on that dial. With that more recessed inner track for the minutes, it is gonna have a sense of stubby hand syndrome. And then the number one downside of this watch is the automatic Miyota caliber. Not that it's a bad movement inside here, but this is a non-hacking movement. And for the price range that it sits at, I think that is maybe gonna be a deal breaker for some. This is not necessarily a problem for me because I do think the upside of having a watch that is distinctive, it's going back to that 1960s, 70s design and having a layout that is truly its own and can stand on its own in a segment of under $1,000, typically is something that doesn't always happen in dive watches. Many of it is just copy and paste. This one is not as much that. So the time of year around the summer, I like an all gold watch. Not for me personally, but it looks great on certain people out there that can actually work it. There's not everybody that can do this, but for the select few that can pull this off with the confidence needed, I think it's an amazing combination, say with like a crisp white shirt or polo shirt. I don't know, it just has some really cool ability to complement a nonchalant, carefree type of look. And I think if you're trying to do that, say like that Rolex day date type of approach on a budget, I think this is probably the best option for $500 with the Teso PRX Gold. So of course, not a gold watch. It's going to be stainless steel PVD in a gold tone, but with the bracelet, the intermingling of polishing within those facets, I just love how this thing pops off the wrist. You have a 35 and a 40 millimeter option, pretty much mirroring what I would look at from a day date. You have 36 millimeter option, a 40 millimeter option. And both of these watches are gonna wear slightly larger than that case size. 100 meters of water resistance. These are quartz powered, so that might be a deal breaker for some. But if you just want to watch under 500 bucks, you want that gold tone look, which I think looks great again in the summertime when this can catch the light, this is probably the best option you can find under $500. So now for some micro brands, and I have a select few micro brands here that I wanted to look at. If you want more micro brands, I'd recommend checking out our article looking at, I think it's over 50 now, brands in the micro category. If you want to use that as a nice jumping off point, you like this subgenre of watches, recommend checking that out. I can link to that down below. But first off, we have the Traska Freediver. Now Traska came on the scene with their Freediver mostly as a way of that mint dial, that mint green dial. It just looks so striking and it's colorful, it's playful, and it works really well with the approach here. 40.5 millimeter case, thickness of 10.5 millimeters, lug to lug of 48 millimeters, so gonna wear pretty true to that case size. 200 meters of water resistance, very solid lume. You have a 9 series Miyota caliber on the inside, so that's their 4 hertz movements, hacking and hand winding, and better range of accuracy standard out of the box. And Traska usually does a nice job with making sure regulation is in alignment with what to expect from these Miyota calibers. But another thing I like about this watch, apart from the pop of color and the finishing of the bracelet in the case, is going to be the treatment of the case itself. 1200 HV on the Vickers hardness scale. This thing is going to resist scratches. Whenever I've demonstrated this in a video or shown somebody this and how this is able to resist scratches in a price range like this, it's always has its wow factor, and it's kind of a science experiment. It's kind of a way to, maybe impress some people. I remember I did a video with Kevin O'Leary. He was really impressed with this, and getting this in a product around $600 is really nice to see. Now this next watch here is from Studio Underdog. This is a newer micro brand started in 2020 during the pandemic. But when you look at this thing, I mean, come on, does this not exude everything about summer? This is known as their watermelon chronograph. So just over $600, 38.5 millimeter case, thickness of 13.6 millimeters, and a 44 millimeter lug to lug distance with 50 meters of water resistance. I know that's not technically to the 100 meters, but it is a chronograph after all, so I will give it the pass. But the other reason why I think this needs to be included, pink, green, looks like a watermelon. When do you have watermelon? During the summer months. I mean, maybe other times you have it too, but still, I think it's going to exude that summer look. The other thing I will say, Seagull movement on the inside. Do you want to pay the extra money for a Seagull movement when you can get something like the Seagull 1963 for less money when it has a similar movement on the inside? that really comes down to you. We've seen Baltic have some success with a similar price range for offering a Seagull movement. There is going to be some complications with this as the years go on and you have to get this service. Chances are you're not gonna get it serviced, you're just gonna probably replace the movement, if anything. So just keep that into consideration. This is a visually entrancing movement, but it does come with the challenges of being an anomaly in the price range of getting a mechanical chronograph of this complexity for around $600. The service and replacement costs might be more than what you would like for a watch of this price category. And then for the last micro brand here, I wanna look at Aster Banks with their Fortitude. So this is a watch that is an extension on a watch that originally put me onto this brand with the C range, dropping the bezel, similar type of approach with the second hand, and then being a more traditional three-hand model. These come with price ranges between $650 to $695, depending on the strap choice, if you go for the bracelet or not. But I just love the way that these look. The finishing is also very solid, and you have a variety of different dial colors to go for. You have this peach, you have this mint, you have this blue. It has all these pastel colors that just feel very much at home during this time of year. 38.5mm case, so very wearable with a 46mm lug to lug, just south of 12mm thickness. Automatic Miyota 9 series movement, so absolutely a great movement for the price here. And then also 200 meters of water resistance and sapphire crystal, so great durability in the process. This is a kind of do-it-all, everyday style watch with a splash of color to go along with it. Now jumping from the world of micros back into what I would call more mainstream brands, we have Doxa. And I was contemplating what is a better Doxa to put here, but I would say the Doxa sub 200 makes more sense for more people. It's more of an entry-level option, and it's probably more user-friendly, if that's a good term for this, compared to say like the Doxa sub 300 as an example. I see this as being more of a mass appealing option. $950 for it on the strap, and then $990 for it on the Beads of Rice bracelet. 42mm case is going to wear slightly smaller than that. I'd say like a 40.5 to 41mm, 13.7mm in thickness. So it is gonna sit a little higher on the wrist. 200 meters of water resistance, automatic at a 28-24 movement on the inside, sapphire crystal, a variety of different dial colors to choose from, all with corresponding names like the other lines within the Doxa sub family. One thing I will say that's disappointing with these watches is the lume is not good for a Doxa. You would think Doxa would absolutely smoke it with their dive wash pedigree when it comes to their lume, but unfortunately these are not great performers in that department. Now taking one dive watch brand that certainly has contributed quite a bit to the diving arena to another with Zodiac in the Seawolf collection. Now these watches are commonly associated with their pops of color nowadays, and I think for good reason. There's been so many different variations to choose from that have become popular, and I think now with this $1,000 price range that they have, at $1,000 to $1,500, they've really carved out this nice niche for this type of approach to diving, and also having some dive watch history to lean on. 1953, original Seawolf was unveiled. So we have two options here that I'm gonna showcase. One is the ZO 9270 and then the 9269. These are known as the watermelon and sometimes referred to as the sherbet options from the brand. 40mm cases, 13.4mm lug to lug, 48.9mm with that lug to lug distance. Both of them are gonna wear like a 40.5mm case, 200 meters of water resistance, automatic STP 313 on the inside. STP is the movement provider, Swiss movement provider owned by the Fossil Group, who also owns Zodiac. I'd say they're number 3 in the pecking order of Swiss-made movements available from a third-party perspective. You have Edda, Salida, STP probably third, Sapphire Crystal, but I just like the look of these. These are probably in the under $1,500 range, just no-brainer dive watches that have history to back them up, and I think Zodiac has their surge in expanding their offering as well as their popularity does not surprise me at all. These just fall in a really nice range. You have the diving history behind it. That just makes a ton of sense. Now another brand here that certainly does the summer watch well, or more colorful watch well, is Nomos, here with the Nomos Club Campus Future Orange. Future Orange is what they call it. So for starting around $1,500, you can get into this watch, 36mm, 8.2mm thickness as a result of the alpha manual caliber on the inside. Lug to lug is going to be more broad on this watch, so probably gonna wear closer to a 38mm when you strap this one on the wrist, maybe 37, 38mm, right around there. Sapphire crystal, 100 meters of water resistance. So it is giving you that sporty upside, pop of color. For what you're getting from a value perspective here, I just love the way that these watches look. Some people are not gonna maybe like the manual caliber on the inside for a watch that kind of does exude this more sporty feel, but the alpha manual movement, beautiful movement to look at, not gonna be available for the more entry-level option, but if you do spend a bit more, you can get that exhibition case back, which if you have the extra money, I think is worth it. It's a really nice way to get into a beautiful looking movement for that $2,000 range. Now here is another watch that just screams, wear me in the summertime, and that is Oris with the Diver 65 cotton candy. So this does a double whammy here for me. One, pastel colors, the way they look with those dials. Then you also get a full bronze case and bracelet. If you want to opt for the bracelet option, you do have a strap version you could go for as well. I've seen these now patina in the wild, and they just look really cool with those pastel colors. The hue of the case changes so much, but that maintained pastel look in combination, it could just create a totally different feel when you experience this watch, you bring it with you in your day-to-day. I just love how they adapt and change with wear. And with having that constant with the pastel, it's just even more exaggerated than normal. 38 millimeters with the diameter, thickness of 12.8 millimeters, lug to lug of 45.7 millimeters. So gonna wear, I would say pretty true to that 38 millimeter size, which I think is very nice for both men and women. 100 meters of water resistance, so not to the extreme for their divers. That's one of the downsides of the Diver 65, but certainly plenty for, I'd say 99.9% of people out there. SW200 on the inside, and a sapphire crystal with that box effect to lean into that 1960s design that this diver, of course, is going for, with some splashes along the way. So next up here, we have the Ball Marvelite Caring Edition. So when you first look at this watch, you're like, okay, what's going on here? This looks like a standard ball, but it has this pop of color. Then you turn off the lights, you get in complete darkness, and then you see the magic happen with these tritium tubes. They just pop with this rainbow style effect, and I just think this looks amazing. This is probably one of the cooler ball watches out there. It's not gonna be for everybody, but this is unique to them with their use of tritium tubes. Not many brands are doing it. The only brands that really are utilizing it still are going to be like Ball, Marathon, Luminox, just to name a few. So it's a very select crowd that are even doing this. This is available in a 40 and a 43 millimeter option, 100 meters of water resistance, a SW200 movement on the inside, sapphire crystal. So it does have the ordinary tool watch approach, but this is the most playful ball watch that I can think of. It utilizes what they're known for with their use of tritium tubes, and then how they can exercise that with some level of creativity with the pops of color. This is an unconventional choice, not gonna be for everybody, of course, but if you want something different in a price range under $2,500, this is one of the coolest ball watches I've seen released. Now for our next watch here, we have Breitling with the Breitling Super Ocean 57 edition. So when I originally wanted to include this watch on this list, it wasn't for the traditional 57, although those are fine dive watches in the price range. I was actually looking at a special edition piece with the colorful array of markers on the dial, which was actually made to help healthcare workers across 6 different countries. It was limited to, I believe, 1,000 pieces, but these are now trading for higher prices than retail. So I don't know if those are no-brainers anymore, but I think it's still, at the end of the day, if you have the money to spend, they're fun, they're cool, they're different, they're intriguing. The pops of color make them great choices for this list. But even if you can't do that, you do have the traditional Super Ocean options with some different colors that I also think are great options. 42 millimeters, thickness of 9.9 millimeters, lug to lug of 46 millimeters. So gonna wear closer to a 40.5 millimeter case. 200 meters of water resistance. These do have ETA calibers on the inside. They do use the ETA 2892, so the slimmer, more upscale of the 2824. Sapphire crystal having that dome box sapphire effect with the combination of that slanted inward bezel that has become a defining characteristic from the original in that 1957 design that this one is clearly looking back towards. For our next watches here, we have the Omega Aqua Terras for 2022. When I first saw these were watches that I was not surprised that they got some hate because of the Rolex Oyster Perpetual connection, but when you handle them, you're like, okay, I can get over the maybe let me copy your homework type of thing that's happening here, because I imagine these are going to do well, and I kind of want one. The terracotta one specifically is beautiful. That one has a different vapor deposition process than the rest of the dials, but you have a variety to choose from. You have 5 in the 38 millimeter option, and also another 5 in the 34 millimeter option. The 38 also had an adjustment to the bracelet with that rounded off center link, so it does feel more comfortable on the wrist. 13.2 millimeters for the thickness, so these aren't going to be the thinnest. It does utilize the Omega 8800 caliber, so that only has the single barrel, not going to be that of the 8900. Still a very solid coaxial escapement movement on the inside, master chronometer certified, 150 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown, so going to have you covered in pretty much every scenario. Some don't like the position of the date window on these at 6 o'clock with not having any faceted frame to them. It just feels like it's floating. I can look past that. It's less noticeable in some of the variants versus others. And of course have a sapphire crystal. These come in at $6,000. I think my favorite, and really what I think this whole collection is about, is getting into these more colorful arrays. I like the terracotta and then also the saffron. Those are probably my two favorites, but also the green dial is rather striking as well. And to round out our list, we have the Rolex Oyster Perpetual. These are of course available in a variety of dial colors and maybe were the reason for the increased trend for some of the different things that we've seen from maybe Omega. We saw Zen with their different array of colors. We've seen also the fascination with these pastel colors just across the industry outside of even this traditional three-hand format that the Oyster Perpetual has had a stranglehold on for quite some time. 100 meters of water resistance, variety of dial colors to choose from, Rolex 3230 movement on the inside, COSC certified, plus or minus 2 seconds a day in terms of range of deviation, sapphire crystal, and at retail, these are probably the best watches that you're gonna find from a just everyday luxury perspective. I still love the Oyster Perpetual. Damn shame what has happened to this line. I would actually say, even compared to the Daytona, for some of the trading prices for certain dial color variations, they have discontinued a couple of those colorful pastel colors, the Tiffany blue being one of those casualties. With that watch's trading value for some time, it's coming back down to earth now, but even with multiples of the price, I think that might be the most grotesque of anything that's happening with Rolex, because the Oyster Perpetual is the entry-level option for the brand. It always has been, and it's just craziness what has happened with them. But still, when it comes to starting this trend and also being a watch that would look fantastic during this time of year, Oyster Perpetual has to be there. Okay guys, now that is my list looking at the best watches for summer. I know summer watch is not a technical term by any means, but this was a fun way of going and navigating, putting a lot of unconventional picks together in one list compared to like the best of the best. It allowed to exercise some more creativity in the types of watches chosen, which I enjoyed. So if you found this video helpful or you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Really would appreciate that. Also, be sure to check out that Field Watch article down below if you want more, as well as that microbrand article to see more watches that certainly would be fitting the mold for the category here. Also, TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the new products that we offer. If you want to stay up to date with the content, Instagram's a great place to be. See some great photos of watches in the process, and then also subscribe to our newsletter on our website. You get dedicated written content sent to your inbox every single week. It's completely different than the content that we're creating here. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.